Good evening, Gearheads. Welcome to Speed City. This is John Massengale sitting at home, a virtual studio, and Jonathan Green and Les Kaiser have joined me. How's it going, boys?
All righty. Happy Mother's Day to all of them out there.
That's right. Happy Mom's
Mother's
Day,
everybody.
Hey, we got a great show for you tonight. Let me run down what we got. We have a guest here. We have Tim Frost, and Tim is a great resource. He's a motorsports industry, economic, and financial consultant in the motorsports world. And he's going to join us and talk about everything from how COVID-19's affect motorsports, what we can expect to see these series like IndyCar opening up and everybody else for that matter, and including Formula One supposedly in July. And we'll talk about some of the series that have already opened up. He's also a good resource for the automotive industry in general. So we'll pick his brain and talk to him about all of the above. And we're going to talk about IndyCar opening up in next month, June 6th, and here in Texas, not in Austin, but here in Texas. So we'll talk about that. And we're also going to talk several stories have to do with the way COVID has affected motorsports, and including F1's plans and how those might be affected, their biosphere and all the different aspects. And then we're going to talk about some virtual racing. We'll jump right into that pretty quick, but Formula One had their virtual race, the Spanish Grand Prix, and Trans Am. Jonathan did a little commentary for the Trans Am Esports Series. And we got lots of stories, including some of the things that are happening out at Circuit of the Americas. But boys, let's jump in and talk about some e-racing. Jonathan, why don't you talk about Trans Am first, because you were on the microphones for those guys.
Yeah, it's hotting up. This is our third round. We were at Daytona. And we got a championship. Ernie Francis Jr., our six-time champion, finally got a win. And we've got about 4 drivers who have all been in the top 5 in each of we have 2 races from each round. So we've had 6 races in total. We've been to Laguna Seca, we've been to Road Atlanta, and now Daytona. And we have a reverse top 10 for the second race. So it makes it a little bit more interesting. And we're starting to get some interest because we had a Montoya and a Tony Kanaan involved in the race.
That's
Montoya
awesome.
was Sebastian Montoya, a 15-year-old son of Juan Pablo. And, of course, TK is TK. He joined Trans Am, and we're trying to see if we can take him away from Indy, because, as you know, it was supposed to be TK's last season in IndyCar, but he joined us. He got 2-point scoring results and got sponsorship behind him, so we're hoping to keep him.
So how did he think about all this virtual racing? You know, he's not the spring chicken.
No, and it was funny because he came to the driver's briefing, which we do by Zoom, and I'm like, hey, TK, and he's like looking around the screen, and I'm like, welcome aboard. And it was his first ever Trans Am race, although he had told me that he had done a couple of stock car races in Brazil way back, and he had sort of flirted with the idea of doing the odd cup race back in the day, but it just never came to be. He did the iRacing series for Indy, but he was never really a factor. But interestingly enough, when I asked him about his rig, he had all the right pedals, all the right gear, but he's only been doing it 5 weeks. So you can imagine he's now like dialed in. And so the Indy series is finished. We've got another 6 rounds left. So hopefully he'll stay with us, but he might be racing all over. So good to see him involved.
Yeah, I saw that he wasn't really a factor in the Indy iRacing and wondered if I'm glad to see him getting some points in Trans Am. But I want to talk about the F1 Virtual Series because it was actually really, really good racing. And George Russell with his first Formula One win, Williams beating Ferrari at the finish. It was actually really great because those guys were battling out along with Alexander Albon. Albon decided to do a 2-stop and was not able to catch back up. But it was interesting the way the race ended because George Russell got a 3-second penalty for track limits, right? And he was catching Leclerc, and he finally caught Leclerc and got ahead of him. But he was only a gap of about a second. He was having trouble getting out of DRS and breaking that second threshold. And on the very last lap, Leclerc got a 3-second penalty for track limits for the same thing. But right about that same time, George Russell had broken through the second for DRS. So anyway, it was a really exciting finish. And actually, I was just as enthralled, I have to admit it, with that, the last few laps of that race as I was a Formula One race. So it was really good racing.
It was. The cool thing was, Russell being up there for one and being so competitive, Leclerc was not holding back at all and racing all out. You know, what I liked about that is over the past week, and you know, throw it to Lee Diffie over on the Indy YouTube channel. You got to check out his interview that he had this past week. It was really good. But talking about how serious guys are taking the esports world, it really is interesting what these drivers are willing to do or not willing to do, and how serious they're taking these offs and these risky moves of cutting the apex maybe a little too much. But
you know, and interestingly, Les, you're right. A lot of them are taking it seriously because of one reason. Look at George Russell. Look at the profile George Russell's receiving with a team like Williams, who, let's face it, for the last 3 years have been mud in Formula One because they've done nothing, sadly. And George Russell, obviously young and getting a name for himself in Formula One, but he's not in a competitive car at the moment. So he's really making hay now. And, you know, you look around the motorsport websites and George Russell's name is up there. So it's got to be doing his career no harm.
Yeah,
I totally agree. You know, we question how much of this is applicable to the racing on the track, but I think in how serious you're taking this as a driver translates to that aspect of being on the team, working with your corner spotters and things like that, and the rest of the team, because some of these guys do have their team behind them, helping out and talking to them.
Hey, I want to talk about basically the same thing you guys are just saying, but I was watching this and it really struck me, and I was taking some notes, is that the guys who did well, so just, you know, looking at the top 10, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Gutierrez, Alexander Albon, Nicholas Latifi, then Anthony Davidson, and then Giovinazzi, and then Pietro Fittipaldi, you know, the Haas F1 reserve driver. And so all the F1 drivers are all at the top of this, right? I mean, and there's guys like Jimmy Broadbent, who's a big-time gamer. And these guys are not, the gamers are not competing with the F1 drivers at this level. And I'm thinking, you know, Leclerc, he wasn't even doing this, jumped right in and went straight to the top. He's been, for this virtual season, he's been the fastest. So I think there's more to this. I think it's accurate enough that their skills in the real world translate pretty good to the virtual series.
Oh, no question about it. And a lot of these guys,
training credibility.
Esteban Gutierrez is the simulator driver for Mercedes. So that's his job. As we know, he was a Haas driver and a Formula One driver in his own right. But when he was let go, Mercedes picked him up. And just like Hartley back in the past, you know, that's an official full-time job now, is to work the simulator for the drivers and develop the car. So he's on a simulator all the time. Now, that simulator might be a little bit more sophisticated than the one he's using. But, yeah, these and you mentioned a couple there. I mean, Fittipaldi, another one, who's probably doing a lot of sim work for Haas because he's basically practicing to get in the car for real.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm waiting on somebody to totally up the game and get the team simulator connected into iRacing.
That is a good idea.
It's not that, yeah, we were saying in Trans Am, we want a camera on all our drivers because Boris Said is now driving in our Trans Am series. And at the driver's briefing, his curly-haired, almost identical-looking son of about 15 was sat next to him. And I said, so who's going to be doing the driving? So, yeah, Les, I like your point because unless you put a camera, you could be anywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. But think about the potential equipment that they're using, and I don't know, maybe it's got some additional telemetry that might show up better than what we see just in the usual iRacing. I don't know.
Well, I tell you what, if George Russell is using the Williams simulator, I've been to that simulator, and I tell you what, it's a glass box that effectively is a racing car. It looks like a lunar module is what it looks like, but you can have the whole desk and all of the input there. And you can have race engineers and engine engineers and, you know, tacticians. So, yeah, maybe that's why George Russell's just got the edge.
Yeah. And of course, Lando Norris did not finish again another race. I was watching. I went back and looked at his Twitch, and he had a giant glitch, which stopped his whole car. And then shortly after that, he just backed into the garage and shut off his Twitch. I don't know what happened. So
I think Ricardo's pulling the plug at the flat down below him or something.
yeah, he's using up the bandwidth, opening a bunch of YouTube windows. All right, guys. Well, hey, let's go ahead and take a break, because when we come back, really excited because our guest, Tim Frost, he's a great expert in the motorsports industry and the economic and financial side of the world. And so we're going to have him on to talk all about how COVID-19's affected everything and how everybody's going to get started racing again in the real world. You listen to Speed City live in Austin, Texas, back after these quick breaks.
Hi, this is Mario Andretti, and this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back to the show, Gearheads. We appreciate you sticking with us through the break. This is John Massengill sitting in my house, and Jonathan Green, Les Kaiser joining from their houses as well here in Austin, Texas, doing a little social distancing. But we are very excited because we've got a guy who is a motorsports industry economic and financial consultant. He's a numbers guy, and that's what we all need to talk now. Data and numbers to get back to racing. We want to welcome Tim Frost. Tim, welcome to Speed City.
Yes. Hi. Good evening, gentlemen. Pleasure to be on your show tonight.
Yeah, Tim, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Tim, we're really excited because we're all sitting around our houses right now and waiting for racing to start. We got IndyCar starting here in about a month, and I know that there's some of the racing that's getting started right now, but I want to talk to you about, give us an overview of the way you think that this has affected. I know that's a huge question, but let's start with an overview of how this has affected our motorsports, our sport that we know and love.
Well, as we know, it's a very unfortunate circumstance that we are all facing around the globe, and we know it's affecting all types of the economy. But the sports and entertainment and the live event sector is really taking it on the chin for that. And when you go through and look at how that is happening, and now as we've gotten a little bit, 8-10 weeks down the road in here, when we look at the rollout plans which are coming back, it looks like that the sports industry and events are really going to be the last ones to go through and actually see how it is going to be able to come back for it. And when we go back specifically to what you guys are looking at, and we roll back the calendar to that event in Australia Grand Prix, and literally not anybody really knowing what was going to happen, and they had to make an audible call from the pit wall there to basically say, we're not going to go through and run this event for that. So we go back through and we look, 10, 11, 12 weeks down the road right here, and we're starting to kind of figure out. We're starting to see events that are coming back in place. We're coming and seeing, okay, what is the protocol that's going to be like this? But for our industry in motorsports, it's really been a tough road to go through and do, because again, these our business, and especially from the team and the event standpoint, they depend on certain revenue streams which really go through and do it. From the team standpoint, especially at Formula One, their largest revenue sources are coming from sponsorship, and it's coming from prize money from Formula One, aka Liberty Media, for that's in there. So they're really seeing it. And if we get over to the venue side, they're seeing it from ticket sales, and they're not being allowed to go through and do it. So, and again, it trickles down because they can't afford to go and keep their businesses operating, whether it be a track or whether it be a team. So they're going to have to and have been laying off their staff for that, because again, there's just no reason to go through and do. So we're starting to see the events kind of take some place. We've had some just recently on the lower levels, but it's really tough, and we're trying to figure it out. And it looks like we're going to have some larger open wheel and stock car events that'll be occurring here in the next week or two, a couple of weeks.
Well, I've got a question for you. I mean, those things we've been hearing about, we've been looking at them and reading them, but maybe there's a whole new industry that really brought up a lot of exposure in the esports and the virtual racing for these guys. We heard Lando Norris getting numbers of $250,000 to $500,000 for what he's earned in racing games. Do you have any insight into what the real impact financially is around that?
Yeah, that's been really interesting. And, the platform, as you guys had talked about in your prior segment, really, the iRacing and the company behind iRacing in particular. Obviously, there's other players in the space, as you said, with, Torque Esports and a few other games that are out there. But, the history of iRacing is pretty unique. Originally started as a kind of PC console game under the name of Papyrus Designs. That one of their early investors, run by John Henry, owner of Fenway Sports, and also with Roush Fenway Racing, was an early investor. So with them starting and really putting a lot of time and effort behind this, literally started back in the mid 90s as a Route 28, 98 tech company in Boston area. They've really done it. And it just so happens we really had the whole convergence of everything this year, where the iRacing platform has been, fully embraced by specifically the NASCAR folks, and obviously the other series that are out there. And to see that the lack of live programming that was available to the broadcast partners, and then seeing Fox really get in, and the other partners in there saying, hey, let's see if we can go and throw those events. And if you really get down, just as you talked about, specifically from a driving standpoint for whatever series that's going to be for Lando Norris at Formula One, but the ratings that have been showing up on the NASCAR series, we're looking at stuff around 1 million plus viewers on that. From a rating standpoint, really isn't all that bad that's in there. So I really think it is. And the technological being able to put all those pieces together, not unlike your broadcast here, and each one has a corner in the Zoom window that we're doing it. But to see them going and working between the servers in Boston, seeing the Fox broadcast and NBC Sports people in Charlotte, down to the individual streams that the drivers are having over their units, putting that all together, via the internet and stuff, that itself from a production standpoint has just been fantastic.
Tim, I got a question. Obviously, here in Austin, we're worried about Formula One. It's pretty quiet over at Elroy right now. And when we read things like Liberty Media's second quarter last year was $246 million, and this year it's just 39 because of what's happened, and they've had to cancel 10 races. They're hoping to come back in July. But Formula One, given the travel they do and the places they go, they've got an enormous task. Do you have any insight onto how they can tackle that, and will they be able to recover?
Well, Formula One and Liberty Media, I mean, we're coming on the third year of ownership under their direction in there. I think what we've seen here is a little bit earlier actually 10 days ago, Liberty Media, with all their various entities there under Greg Maffei and Chase Carey, they actually went and exchanged an interest in their ownership interest within XM Radio and Live Nation in exchange for 1.4 billion in cash in there. So they have really beefed up the interest, the balance sheet of the people at for Liberty Media. So they are actually sitting very strong and very financially there, and have made implications to the teams, the lower level teams. If we need to support you, we will go through and do it. So they are fully committed to the sport. I think that is very, very important from a financial perspective. Every financial institution or bank that's out there realizes when it comes from a loan covenant standpoint, they're having to go through and make amends to that for. So they're taking it on the chin. Each of their individual stakeholders that are in there, their individual event promoters, all around the world, are in there. And I think that there is a concerted effort that this is going to be a rough year financially for everybody in there. Nobody knows where it's going to end up. There's going to be a lot of, there's going to be some carnage on the side of the track and on the roadway that are in there for it. But, from a Formula One perspective, yes, it is complicated because they have worldwide travel that they have to kind of go through and do with that. But, they've got the right people on board. Any entity is going to bring in the right, advisors from a medical perspective, from a logistics standpoint, from a sanitation standpoint that's in there. And again, most of their individual promoters and venues that host their races, they really see the value in hosting these events and stuff like that. So yes, it is a challenge in there. And specifically when we get into Austin there, you've got a beautiful facility. You've got a great history with Formula One, many other events in the live entertainment industry. And it's a challenge right now. There's no question about it for Bobby Epstein down there to be able to go through and do with that. And, it is going to come back. It is going to be slowly. It is going to be expensive to go through and do. So any venue that's out there has really, they got in front of the curve and said, okay, whatever we need from a staffing standpoint or anything like that. Unfortunately, for professionals working in the industry, it's been tough. But, I think they're all going to be able to get through this. The thing about racing, as we all know, people are very resourceful, and they're going to go work on whatever means are available from a financial and other means from an equipment standpoint also.
Well, Tim, we know that IndyCar is going to start on June 6th up in Fort Worth, and I think that is compared to Formula One, it's a much easier equation. You're dealing with one country and the rules of one country, and you talk about Formula One and all the different professionals they've got, but it's such a monumental task going from country to country. How realistic do you think it is for them to get started and to get they're talking 15 races in? I mean, how realistic and do you think it's going to happen?
Well, I think what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go and make they're going to have to go and make some changes. Obviously, that's in there. Every sport, from the NFL to the Premier League to La Liga Soccer, they're all making contingency plans in there. So this year, if it is when they do have targeted going to Austria for their first venue and kind of do 2 events right there, that's the way it's probably going to be. If they have the ability to be able to lock down these facilities to know spectators or whatever, just to kind of get the protocol down and everything like that. I think that's what they're going to have to do. In the United States, the first real racing that took place from a live standpoint was Friday night up at Knoxville Raceway, where the World of Outlaws ran in there. So they went in with a very detailed contingency plan. They submitted that to the authorities out there. They worked on it with their partners and said, okay, let's go in through and do it. Let's see how it turns out. Now, the way that they worked on it from their business model is they didn't sell tickets, but they also did a streaming pay-per-view, and the numbers from that were probably pretty substantial in there because the audiences are really looking for it. Now, fast forward to when IndyCar goes up to Texas in there. We know that we've got, your great state of Texas down there, where the governor and other municipal authorities are big backers of sports, and they're going to go through and work with them and say, okay, what can we do to make this happen? Here are the boxes you've got to check. Obviously, you've got one of the greatest promoters with Eddie Gossage in there that's going to go through and do an IndyCar being a very professional series. So it's going to take a couple of steps. It's not going to go and be exactly easy in this, but what you're doing is you're going to see a level of professionalism, and entities and teams and everybody through the whole system is going to be willing to go and work for that, that's in there. And the broadcast partners are having to go through and do, and the amount of logistics that they have to go through and handle from, one of the things, I'm on a motorsports media session by the United States Motorsports Association, where they're laying guidelines for media, meaning how do you gentlemen, from a broadcast perspective, what are the protocols and procedures that you have to do to be able to access content for racers that are there? For example, what you're not seeing is there's not going to be victory lane type of things. Do they have to go through, and in the broadcast trucks, do they have to go through and put in, screens for individual ones? Do broadcasters have to have their own microphones and own headsets for that? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that behind the scenes nobody is really aware of from the fans that are out there that's in there. So I think it's going to go and happen. It will happen. It will take a couple of races that are in there. It's going to be some things where they debrief. But as you said, that's something that our industry and the people and professionals working in it are very proficient and dedicated to making this happen, whether it be on or off the track.
Well, Tim, we're up against the break. If you got a couple of minutes to stick with us through the break.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I want to ask you when we come back, I want to talk about who you might think might be casualties in the motorsports world of this pandemic. So stick with us through the break and listen to Speed City. We're live in Austin, Texas. Back after these messages.
This is David Hobbs, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to the show. And we have on the line, we have Tim Frost. He's the president of Frost Motorsports. He's also the publisher of the National Speedway Directory. That's a great resource for the motorsports industry. And he's also been the host of the Racetrack Business Conference. I think that's where you met him, Jonathan. But
That's right.
Tim, we have a bunch of questions for you, but let's go with the one that we went to the break with, where I was asking, I've been sitting here thinking, what is the fallout going to be? Are we going to see circuits go out of business? Are we going to see, teams dropping out? What do you think is going to be the fallout from this?
We're going to see, individual incidences on all of our stakeholders. There's going to be casualties. It's unfortunate, but again, we're dealing with, unprecedented that, none of us have seen for that matter. So specifically, when we go to, when we do see casualties in there, typically it may present a buying opportunity for those who are in the ability to go through and do this. I think what you're going to go through and see from a large facility standpoint, if we switch over to the larger facilities here in the United States, we're seeing two publicly or formerly publicly traded entities the people in Charlotte at Speedway Motorsports, and then you're seeing the people down at Daytona with the France family and NASCAR and International Speedway Corporation, and then up in Indianapolis with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar and Roger Penske. What's interesting is all three of those entities merged, sold, or went private in the last quarter of 2019. What you're seeing is now, in order to take out those shareholders and everything that's in there, on two of the three, you see a large amount of leverage and debt was taken out to take these companies private. Basically, NASCAR and the ISC merger added about $1.3 billion in debt over on the Speedway Motorsports side. And the Smith family, they had about $600 million in debt. Roger Penske, as you see, the figure thrown around there was anywhere from probably $250 to $350 million for that. What that does go and say, though, is we have people, and this also comes over to the team side, especially on the Formula One side. We're seeing individuals who have the ways and means to be able to, invest in our sport and are truly committed to this sport. And that is unique to the sports and entertainment industry. Same thing goes over on the stick and ball sports. But what it is, these companies just went in and took a huge amount of debt. They've got a large amount of payments to being able to make to service those acquisitions and those financial transactions. But what you're seeing is you're going to see some flexibility in the system from the financial institutions, whether it be commercial banks, hedge funds, or whatever. In that they're realizing that they are having to go through and work with these type of entities that are in there. Now we get to the team side. What's really interesting is we've seen over on the Formula One side, we've seen individuals who are very successful from north of the border, and especially a lot of the Canadians there that have sons or offspring that are driving in Formula One, have made huge investments over in Europe for either the team, the manufacturer side of things, for that in the tune of anywhere from $100 to $300 million for that. So again, what we're seeing is this is a passion-based industry, as we're all aware of. And those people that have been successful in other forms of business or other types of things, they have the ability to go through and invest in this business in here. But again, when you're investing these types of sums, when you get to that level of financial wherewithal and financial net worth, you're not just going to go and spend money so you can get a car on the track for that. What you are doing is you're going to be making a sound business decision that's out there to say, okay, this is what I'm going to go through and spend the money on for that. So yes, there are going to be some casualties. You're going to see things that are in there. Specifically, you're seeing the first type of adjustments have just come out the last couple of days from the people at NASCAR and ISC. We're seeing certain layoffs that have occurred over the last several weeks. NASCAR and ISC have done that. NASCAR has actually gone and said there's going to be a couple tracks that will not be racing this year at Sonoma and also Chicagoland Speedway. They're also seeing the ability to potentially go and redevelop some of the excess property that are around there. If there's economic higher and better use for those for commercial development or warehousing or something else like that. So there's always that possibility that's in there for it. But again, what we're doing is we're seeing, there's just a major shift. It's going to take some time to go through and do. But again, really what is driving our industry when you look at it from a revenue side is the media contracts. It's those dollars that are coming in, being paid by the broadcasters to put those platforms out there. So that's really what's driving it. We know from an attendance standpoint, every series is being challenged and they're promoting it. But, hopefully we're getting, through this little bit of time off, we're getting some new alternative sports from esports that are coming in there, and we're getting some new things. So let's hope more fans come out to watch the race, whether it be online or when we finally do get to go to the track, it'll be under a little different scenario.
Tim, it's fascinating hearing your insight, and at the perfect time too. I've been wanting to have you on for a while because it's always fascinating to hear. And while it is a bit doom and gloom, and we know that, there are some real positives too. And I was listening to the radio today on the national news saying that the big three in Detroit are going back and starting to make cars again as of tomorrow, or at least beginning to get people through the gates again. And that is a massive thing, because without the auto industry, there is no motorsport.
No, you're exactly right on that. And you're seeing that with the backing of the with the manufacturers that are in this. And again, they're using this for, for multi-purposes, whether it be market, product development, all of the above that's in there. And again, we're really going to get a peek, as we said, obviously we had the World of Outlaws like that. We're going to see NASCAR go next weekend. And we've got 7 races in 10 days that are out there. They have kind of laid out their plan a little bit, but we're going to see in the next 3 or 4 days additional procedures that they are going to invoke in there. And I think that is going to be, one of the first, it will be truly the first major sport that is coming back in front of a live audience for this. And I think they will be, under, a microscope in there. I think there'll probably be some hiccups that will occur like that. That's just natural with anybody when you're, kind of coming back and being first in line for that. And it's going to take some time to go that. But I think from a motorsports perspective and where we stand in line, we're glad that NASCAR is getting out there to go through and do like that, because you know what, everybody's going to want to be there and be part of it to ask those questions. But NASCAR, they're well established. They've got good procedures to go at, good people, and the best part is everybody wants to come back and do this right. As we know in our sport, if there's an incident that happens, everybody gets around to go through and promote safety. So what we're doing here is we're looking at safety. It's just a little bit different. We're looking let's return to the track safely. What can we go through and do? So it's, they're going to walk a little bit. There's going to be some adjustments that are on there, but that's natural in any form of racing for us. So we're all looking forward and we want it to come back. It's going to take some time. And once we're all have that understanding, we're all excited about it.
Tim, one of the things, we've talked about the manufacturers, we've talked about the teams, we talked about the venues. We can't forget the fans. And a big part of what the fan enjoys are those exclusive engagements in suites or in, the fan forums, getting to ask questions and things. Do you think or have you heard of any of the organizations, be it NASCAR or Formula One or any of the IndyCar, talking about a premium fan engagement opportunity, even though they're not at the track?
I think about that is, that's going to be part of the equation and one that's unique that we all enjoy, whether it be the manufacturer midway or, doing a driver sign up or something like that to promote. I really do think that part of our industry and our part of our thing is just not going to be something that's going to be part of the ongoing, equation for the near future, because again, it's just not working. We're all becoming accustomed to the things that we have to do, whether it be from a social distancing standpoint, whether it be, a mask standpoint. We're all thinking about it right now, and being able to go through and get, with an autograph like that's out there. But on the other hand, I think what you're going to do, and I'm sure the teams and their marketing people that are smart out there, they are figuring out different ways to go and re-engage. And I think for any of these drivers and any of these personnel, we're seeing a lot more of these people are actually creating their own content and being much more resourceful than they ever would have been. I mean, one, they have to do it because they want to stay engaged. Some of it might be part of their personal service agreements that they have with their manufacturers, and their sponsors are basically going to say, you know what, in order for us to keep sending you a check, you got to still go out and go do that. So, and it's putting everybody out there. But I think that type of content that we're seeing there is actually been quite engaging in its own right. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit, homegrown. It's organic. And I think we're doing it. And so I wouldn't see that kind of changing. And the consumers and the race fans that are out there, yes, you're going to have your core fans that are going to say, you know what, we want to be at the race. They're going to be there. They're going to do it. I mean, that's what we love about it. It's these diehard people that want to do it. And you know what? We've seen people where they, oversold the track for some of the tracks, especially in Texas or in Oklahoma, that did try to open up for racing. They tried to they tried to take the green flag too quickly on some of that stuff for it. But, we'll dial it back, and, the industry will come forward, and, we'll be better for this. It won't be the same. It'll be on a lower level. But, we'll get there. And I think Formula One will get it. They're used to dealing with things, on a worldwide basis. And I think the governments and the track operators that are there, they're going to figure out a way to make it work. It may not be the way, it's not the way it was, for that matter.
Well, Tim, we're starting to get some questions come in on social media too, but you can tweet at us or Facebook, either one. But a question myself, we've talked about this on the show before you, but we've got your brain. I want to pick your brain about this. Is how do you think Les touched on it, but the success of all this virtual racing it's really been pretty surprisingly huge. And do you think some of this is it's changing that industry for sure, a lot more attention, but how can it blend, or how can it affect the regular racing in all these different series, particularly the success that both Formula One and IndyCar have had with it?
Well, I think what it's done is the growth of esports over the last 24 months has been, tremendous. I think all of us have seen it and said, okay, what's going on? Whether it be Fortnite or, Call of Duty or any of these things, we're kind of saying, okay, maybe that's whatever it is, the kids are playing that. So, but now what we're doing is we're seeing, okay, esports or, driving or simulated driving that we're seeing, we're part of that equation. And now for the last, 10 weeks, it's come up front and center. So I think that, I do think that's going to be part of the landscape going forward on a permanent basis that's there. We have had in the past couple of years, you've had, several contests out there where, people that have, especially on the Formula One thing where, you've had World's Fastest Gamer, you had Forza do their thing where they had the gamers, then finally the winner then goes to get in a car. And I believe it was last year that the person won one of the Formula One, esports series. He basically didn't have his driver's license, if I'm correct in there. So I think what you're doing is you're going to go through and see, you're going to see that rise as part of the equation from a team ownership standpoint. You're already seeing entities go and, hire a couple of drivers and have this be part of the team and going through and doing it with that. The sponsorship there, I think that's one of the things that's been interesting, especially on the NASCAR side, watching their direct feeds. It's given them a chance to provide that additional exposure that's out there. So yeah, and you know what, the simulated driving, when you go to the races and go to the go to the midways, and especially down at COTA down there, those simulated rigs that are out there, the fans are waiting just as long to get behind the wheel to go through and drive the things. So I do think that is probably one of the the stars which are shining from this. From an economic level, it's it's not at a level from a dollar value or anything else like that that derives on the track activity for that. But again, it's just another way for us to go and diversify our base and to reach that additional, additional type of fan engagement that is necessary in today's multimedia world on various platforms.
All right. Well, speaking of fan engagement, we got a question on Twitter from Andy P. He says, "Great guest tonight!" Exclamation. He's excited to have you, Tim. He says, "Curious to see how well the biosphere for Formula One will hold up, and how the team/venues will deal with a positive test. Seems like it's bound to sadly it's bound to happen. Hope everyone can get back on the track safely soon." What do you think about those positive tests and how they're going to deal with it?
I think that's interesting, and that's a question that's coming out there. And I think any of us, as we're watching and we see the news, and you see numbers and statistics that are out there. I think what we're going to see from that, and even going forward, is just the numbers and the results, and see who comes into that and like that. That's going to be part of just the equation. And I think there's going to be, we discussed this actually at our media thing, is from a media perspective and procedures that are going to be out there happen in events. When you go to a racetrack, they have plans in there, and they have a crisis plan, and that crisis plan deals with an accident. There's certain policies and procedures and people who are supposed to go to talk to the media, what they're supposed to say, what they're not supposed to go through and say, and like that. And so we've seen it happen from an accident perspective that's in there. That same type of thing is going to have to be part of the program for when we go into this new environment and racing happens. So after a race goes through and happens, and what people are doing, for example, there's testing that went underway. UFC had run their first shows in Jacksonville this week, and they've got a certain procedure to bring the people in, and quarantine them, and kind of keep them separate and stuff like that. And when people tested positive prior to the events, they basically said, you're not going to be part of the fight card that was going in there. Now, what can happen in racing is, yes, let's go through and see, and there'll be people, if they are, are not able to be at the event, they'll be removed, and there'll be a procedure that's in it. Now, what's going to happen is, as you said, after the race, somebody goes through, they test, and you're maybe on Monday or Tuesday, the results come up and something like that. So I think what it is there'll be a policy and a procedure that will be to go through and deal with it. But I think from a consumer or spectator or industry stakeholder in that, I think that we're going to be attuned to, the numbers are so hard. So there's a lot of people that have caught this disease, unfortunately, but there are most of the majority of people are recovering from that. So I think that the entities are going to have that as part of their playbook on how they go through and deal with that and what's there. And in that way, that will also be acceptable to, the governmental units and everything else like that. So I think it's going to be there. It'll be sad that's in there. But again, it's something that, will be requested by the public health officials of saying, how do you deal with this in your plan?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because especially the timing of NASCAR starting up and then IndyCar starting up. It's going to be interesting because the country's starting to open up here in Texas. We're opening up a little bit. I've been out just a little bit, and everybody that I've run across in retail has been masked up and social distancing. So maybe there's a way for us to figure out how to do this. I'm pretty tentative myself, but it's going to be really fascinating. Well, Tim Frost, we really appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Tim.
Really fascinating to have you on. I wish we could do this for about 2 more hours, but we appreciate we appreciate your time. We appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen, and let's get back to safe racing, and good luck for everybody down in Speed City.
Thanks,
Thank
Tim.
you.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Talk to you soon. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk. We got a couple of things we're going to talk about. Jonathan, you got a really nice video clip that if you're watching on social media that you can watch, but you can hear the audio. We're also going to talk about the huge turnout at Circuit of the Americas today. A massive turnout, actually, and I'm not even joking. You're listening to Speed City. We'll be back after these messages.
Hi, this is Jeff Gordon, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Speaking of NASCAR, Jeff Gordon bringing us back. I love that. Hey, producer, do we have that video that Mr. Jonathan Green sent us up ready to go? I want to make sure. All right. Well, Jonathan, why don't you introduce that? Because this is really cool. I love to seeing the factory shots you got.
Yeah, the one thing, I mean, it was great getting Tim on, and obviously, like I said, we're all suffering, everybody's suffering, but there's some really good stories out there for motorsport. Motorsport is, as Tim said, a very innovative and can adapt. It has that, I mean, you know, that's what motor racing is. It's adapting to change and to do things differently to get an advantage. And so a lot of the motor racing companies, both here in the States and around the world, Formula One included, have been basically making equipment to for the frontline responders, and have been you know, basically doing their thing to try to help the industry, whether it be ventilators, whether it be PPE equipment, and so on. So here's a story with a little bit of a positive edge about motor racing. And thanks to Motorsport Mondial and Greenlight Television, we're able to bring it to you.
In light of the ongoing pandemic, stories have been emerging from around the world showing the global community in action, and the automotive industry is no exception. Rolls-Royce is set to manufacture 30,000 breathing aids in just a matter of weeks, while 7 Formula One teams are also bolstering the support under the title Project Pit Lane. This alliance focuses on 3 major projects. One of these is the Rapidly Manufactured Ventilator System, or RMVS, a breathing support which is used for patients with the most severe form of the disease. Over 30,000 RMVS machines are projected to be required by the National Health Service in Great Britain, a third of which will be produced by Formula One teams. Mercedes are at the forefront of Project Pit Lane and the second project. Having worked alongside University College London to design a breathing apparatus, its Brixworth facility has now been repurposed to produce the system, which is called the Continuous Positive Airway Pressure Device. Elsewhere, Red Bull and Renault are involved in a third project. An invention by a junior doctor for a low-cost portable ventilator was taken from drawings to prototype in just 3 weeks by the 2 teams. While the prototype was not taken to the manufacturing stage, it is still an example of the response and production capabilities of a modern Formula One team. But what about the reaction elsewhere in the world?
Well, one highly successful Trans Am team has adapted its production lines to respond to the US government's call for assistance. Long-time championship supporter Three Dimensional Services Group is well used to reacting under pressure in a racing situation and has experienced high success in the series, helping guide Rafa Matos to the 2018 TA2 Championship. But this isn't exactly the front line the team is familiar with. That's because in this time of international crisis, a branch of the group, Urgent Plastic Services, has been tasked with producing 100,000 protective respirator housings for mobile breathing apparatus. The Detroit-based company is working around the clock to manufacture the required components, and everyone from the sales to management is chipping in. Working 24/7 has allowed the group to slash production time from 5 weeks to just 8 days. Now the Urgent Plastic Services has been asked to add an extra COVID-19 project to its workload. 50,000 tool-injected molded headbands will be manufactured each week in its Michigan facility. These are then fastened to protective shields that will be worn by first responders and medical staff across the USA, a vital piece of protective equipment in the current time. It's great to see that teams up and down the motorsport spectrum have exchanged chasing the pack to leading up the battle against COVID-19's outbreak in this challenging time. And in a global state of affairs such as this, it's proving that when different parties come together and collaborate, the fight against the virus is more likely to be won.
Nice job, Jonathan, voicing that last part.
Thank you. Yeah, that's some work I did for Motorsport Mondial, which is a worldwide motor racing show. And yeah, I'm really glad that they're focusing on that because I don't want it to be forgotten. I mean, there's several Trans Am teams doing similar things, and a lot of it has to do with their 3D printing capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Formula One, motorsports in general, is all about rapid prototyping, changing things on the fly. It's perfect to help in this type of situation. It's really great. Well, hey,
go
ahead, Les. Go ahead, Les.
I expect that as we saw with McLaren into the software and the IT infrastructure world, some of these teams and some of these manufacturers that we're seeing get involved now, they may just hang on to this as another supporting avenue for revenue. I can see this being a good thing.
You know, this virus is going to change our world so dramatically. I mean, we've all seen how work from home, that's going to change forever. And that's going to have positive and yeah.
I don't want to go back to the studio.
And across all industry. Oh God, that is terrible.
That is terrible.
But
tell us about COTA. What happened today?
Yeah, Les, you got that story.
Hey, COTA, Circuit of the Americas, did something really cool. We have, we're all missing being at the track. Circuit of the Americas put on a great event today. safely distanced, very organized. You got to go out and drive a lap on the Circuit of the Americas at a very small pace. But anyway, it was great. It benefited the food bank for Central Texas. Raised, I believe it was over $270,000.
170 actually is what it is. 170.
170. Thank you. Was about 170. And what's so great about that is for every dollar, I think that makes about 5 meals that they get to feed folks. And so there was a lot of great benefit to that. And I just want to say thanks to all the Speed City friends and folks that helped make that happen.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list, and they showed some of the top donors. Germania Insurance, they sponsored the amphitheater out there. They donated $10,000. Bobby Epstein himself donated $10,000, and Glimmer Austin also $10,000. It was such an amazing event, and I think they said that that money is going to provide over 1 million meals. And as we know, with so many people out of work, this is actually really, really important work. And I think it was a fantastic idea from Circuit of the Americas.
Yeah, no question about it. I'm really glad they got the chance to do anything. And I'm sure also that when I'm looking at the pictures, there was a lot of people who probably went up there and have never been around the track. We've been lucky. We've been down a bunch of times. But, I mean, what a thrill for the kids, huh?
I know. You should have seen the people on social media talking how that was just, they loved it. They said it was well organized. They got to drive on the track. A lot of them took their mom out on the track for Mother's Day.
Yeah, I should have thought of that.
I know. How awesome was that? I'm not sure my mom would have enjoyed it, but I love it that some of them did. So
whatever, if you let her drive.
Yeah, that's true. All right, guys. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank Tim Frost, our guest, for coming on. That was really fascinating. That makes me want to do that conversation more. Thanks, everybody, for watching today on social media and listening on the radio. And, of course, we will be back next Sunday night. Talk to you next week.
Y'all.
Happy trails.